Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. We have with us Fred Grieger. We have a couple of things to talk about, but he's the author of Chase the Rabbit, available. You can find it on radiobookshelf.com. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing quite well.
Great.
Hey, Fred, how are you? It's Lou.
I'm doing great, Lou. How are you?
Great. Fred Grieger, our special guest here on our Johnson Ford guest line. Hey, it's always a pleasure to have you. You got the first question, Jake.
I've got a list of them. We've got a couple of things that he's prepared to talk about. So, the Fourth Circuit ruled that the Second Amendment does not protect the right to own assault weapons in the state of Maryland. So no one in Maryland can purchase an AR-15 rifle or anything that looks like one. Okay, what's the difference between an assault weapon and a defensive weapon?
Well, that's really the question, isn't it? It's kind of the perversion that the legal system has employed in treating this situation. I mean, an assault weapon is a weapon that you use when you're assaulting somebody. And if you're using that same weapon to defend yourself, then it becomes a defensive weapon. That's my personal definition. So I think it's a bogus definition. There's no such thing as an assault weapon. If you drive a truck through a crowded street in Berlin, like happened over Christmas, that's an assault weapon. They killed this terrorist killed 14 people using a truck. So in that case, the tractor trailer was an assault weapon. In that case.
The Second Amendment. Why would the Second Amendment advocates object for this ruling in Maryland?
Well, I think Second Amendment advocates in Maryland certainly should object to it because it's a violation of the Constitution for one thing. I think the rest of the country, seems to just be taking it in stride. They don't. It's been in the news that this decision has come across, and people just kind of scratch their heads, going, "Okay, here's another Second Amendment thing coming up." This comes up every half a year, every year or so. There's another new attack on the Second Amendment. I think people just sort of are numb to it, but it's a huge issue because it's such a gross violation of the Constitution in general, and it almost seems to me like there's a pattern of judicial malfeasance all across the country. We saw it a few weeks ago when the judge in Seattle, I forgot his name, he rescinded or filed an injunction against the travel ban, the immigration ban, Trump's executive order, which under the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, Trump has every legal authority to do that. It states that the president has the authority to restrict immigration for the purposes of security. That is the law. He has the right to do that. Nevertheless, these federal judges continue to themselves violate the rule of law, to violate the Constitution, and that's something that everybody in this country really should be very concerned about.
In its ruling, the Fourth Circuit Court referenced District of Columbia versus Heller, in which the Supreme Court declared weapons that could be classified as dangerous and unusual do not fall under protections of the Second Amendment.
That should really elicit laughter, I think, among anybody who's logical. I mean, they say that a weapon that's dangerous and unusual is not protected under the Second Amendment. Weapons are supposed to be dangerous. If it's not dangerous, what good is it? There's a movie with John Wayne where he said True Grit. There's a scene in True Grit where Rooster Cogburn is there, and this other actor asks him, "Is that gun cocked and loaded?" And John Wayne says, "Well, an unloaded cocked gun ain't no good for nothing." So it's just a ridiculous ruling. Let me talk about it from a constitutional perspective. The Second Amendment says, this is exactly what it says. I'm going to read it to you if it's okay. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So the first part of that statement, a well-regulated militia militia being necessary to secure. That's the reason for having it. So the founders, they wanted to state why we want this right to be incontrovertible. And the second statement is the mandate. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's not really open to interpretation at all. Shall not be infringed is an absolute statement, which is not open to interpretation by anybody. And the other part of there are several other parts of the Constitution that apply to this. The other one being the 10th Amendment, which is about states' rights. And a lot of people think that the Second Amendment can be perverted or ignored in certain states under the 10th Amendment states, but that's not the case. The 10th Amendment states the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The operative phrase there is nor prohibited by it to the states. The Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period. That prohibits to the states any infringement of that right. So any state in the country that has regulations or laws that limit or that are intended to restrict ownership of arms, as arms are defined, is a violation of the Constitution. And arms, if you look it up in the dictionary, is armament. It includes ammunition, it includes artillery, it includes anything, to be very clear about the constitutional meaning.
The Supreme Court held that states could restrict automatic weapons and machine guns as weapons of war.
Well, yeah, it says that. The Supreme Court said that. You know, the Supreme Court has been in dereliction of its oath of office for generations now. You know, the Federal Reserve Act is unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court hasn't objected to that either. The Supreme Court is not protecting the constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property with things like Roe versus Wade, you know, under these perversions of logic. That's another example of how the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary all across the country has become an activist body. They're not doing their job. I mean, I've heard this over and over again where people say, well, the Supreme Court's job is to interpret the Constitution. No, it's not. The Supreme Court's job is not to interpret the Constitution. The Supreme Court's job is to interpret law and legislation in terms of its constitutionality. So if they can manipulate and bend the meaning of the Constitution, there's no standard by which to judge any law. It's circular logic. It's an inversion of logic to suggest that the Supreme Court has the authority to interpret the Constitution. That's a vestige of the Roosevelt administration when he tried to destroy the Supreme Court and turned it into a liberal activist body, which he was successful in doing, obviously. But that was originally not the Supreme Court's job. Scalia, the late Justice Scalia said it perfectly once. He said, I have to paraphrase, I don't remember his exact words, but he said if the Constitution were treated as a malleable living document, then what standard is there by which to judge the judges themselves? So the Constitution is carved in stone. Its meaning is fixed. That's why it uses language like shall not be infringed or Congress shall make no law. That language is very explicit and very concrete. You can't interpret that.
Jacob, let me jump in relation to that. Fred Grieger is our special guest on our Johnson Ford guest line. Fred is author of the book Chase the Rabbit, and you can find it at Radio Bookshelf. Fred, where else can the book be found, just to remind the listeners?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, it's on Amazon. First of all, it's available in hardcover and as an ebook. I also have a website of my own, which is www.chase-the-rabbit.com or chase-the-rabbit.com. There's also on there, if your listeners check out my website, there's a link on the top for my blog where I have a bunch of interesting articles on there. There's some very important articles that people need to read on there that have to do with our economy. I talk about the cashless society, the move towards a digital currency. That, in my opinion, I think I mentioned this on your show last time or a couple times ago, that's, to me, in my opinion, the most dangerous thing facing not just people in this country, but all over the world, and it's coming quickly, this elimination of cash in our economy. So look for it there on my website. It's also on BarnesandNoble.com, so it's available in numerous places.
Right. All right, Jacob?
So in that decision, there was a dissenting judge. What was his argument?
That was interesting. I have to remember what he said. I can't remember his exact words, but what struck me about what he wrote, I can't even paraphrase it. I don't remember. I just read this yesterday. But what struck me about his dissenting argument was that, at least the part of it that I read, was he didn't really argue about the law itself. He didn't argue that the Second Amendment should cover assault weapons and why. He argued about the rest of the majority judges. He made a comment that he literally commented on the fact that the majority decision by the other judges was a complete obfuscation and perversion of the Constitution in order to further their political agenda. He actually said that in his decision, which I found to be remarkable, actually, for a judge to vilify his colleagues on the bench, even in the dissenting decision. And that just to me was really indicative of this extreme divide in this country today. That's not just among we the people, but it's even within our own. Our government's divided. Our judiciary is divided ideologically all across this country. That's a pretty scary thing, and it goes to show you how what lengths that judges all across this country will go to further a political agenda instead of abiding by their oaths of office to stick to the law and to stick to the Constitution. We are no longer under the rule of law in this country. We're under the rule of a majority of politicians, and the judges are carrying that out as their enforcers, and that's a scary thing.
Yes, that is scary. I'm certainly in agreement there. What do you see happening?
Boy, I can't tell the future. What I see happening is things are going to not get better soon. Things are going to continue to be very difficult going forward, even under the Trump administration. The Trump administration is under attack by the judiciary. That's how I see it. You can see that's indicative of what happened a few weeks ago in Washington. That judge that put out that order against Trump's executive order about immigration. That was a clear violation of the law. I mean, I said it earlier in this interview. I said that under the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, Section 212F, if you want to look it up, the president has the authority to do what he did, and for that judge to upend that is against the law. And the judge even perjured himself in his own court by claiming that there were no arrests or convictions of terrorists in America since 9/11. The whole thing is preposterous. So I don't see things getting better before they actually get worse. Things could get a lot worse in this country. I mean, in Europe, it's scary what's going on in Europe right now. I just saw this morning there are riots in Paris again. I mean, there's violent riots in Paris going on right now. You're not seeing it in the news. We're seeing about all of the rape and things going on in Sweden because of the immigration there, and then a lot of the mainstream media is trying to claim that that's fake news. It's not fake news. It's not fake news. It's really going on over there. So if that spills over into the United States, which it could, we're going to see things get pretty dangerous here.
Jacob, you got a follow-up question for Fred?
So how does this all tie into Chase the Rapid?
Well, my book is about Chase the Rabbit. I think you mentioned it earlier in the show before I came on. What the meaning of the title is? It's a metaphor for from dog racing for the struggle that the middle class has, not being able to get ahead. You're chasing an American dream that's been deliberately made uncatchable. And the way that's been done is by eradicating property rights, and that's basically the premise of the book is how our property rights have been eradicated deliberately through our economic model and through this corruption of our political system. And this is a manifestation of that. It's a subset of that. Part of destroying the Second Amendment. It's one of the cornerstones of the Bill of Rights. Your ability to protect your property, to protect yourself, is an American tradition. It's a tradition of the rugged individualist, and the powers that be that are trying to destroy that want to destroy our ability have to depend on the government to do it for us. When that makes a country full of dependents, then you have the tools to take everybody's property, and there's nothing they can do about it. So, we wanted to be able to defend ourselves against criminals, against home invasions, against all that sort of thing. But when the government itself becomes your enemy, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when they've taken all of your means by which to protect yourself with? That's how this ties in. It's part of this deliberate eradication of our property rights and the destruction of American individualism.
Fred, it's always a pleasure to have you, my man.
It's a pleasure as well. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Jacob, is Fred still with us? Is he gone?
I'm still on the line if you got another question there. If you
well, fine. Well, Fred, I'm sorry. We probably have to right down to the nuts, but any final thoughts before we let you go?
Oh, I don't know. I'd throw it back at you. I mean, you got any last question about any latest news you've seen going on in the world? Have you seen anything?
Well, I made a statement earlier this morning. There's so much going on. Where do you start? I mean,
yeah, it's true.
It's unbelievable. Huh?
We could be on the air for another hour talking about this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It is unbelievable the stuff that's out there right now. And go ahead, Jacob.
Washington State, the newest sanctuary state. What's your opinion?
Oh my goodness! Yeah, that was that's just another mind-boggling thing. That's Governor Kate. I forgot her last name. I'm sorry. Yeah, she basically signed this order in Washington State, making it a sanctuary state. It's mind-boggling to me that in the state, the governor that actually authorized the execution of Lavoy Finicum, right, at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Oregon last year, if you remember, when the FBI chased this man down in waist-deep snow and then shot him because he was part of the protest at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge. That protest, I don't know, I want to tie this into what you just asked me, but it's just an assault on our dignity as a country. It's an assault on our sense of logic and justice in this country. When those 6 or 8 or 10 guys camped out at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge to protest an invasion of property rights by the federal government, that's what they were protesting. They sent the FBI out there. They sent the National Guard out there because these 10 guys were on a deserted federal land, which was closed for the winter, just to make a statement. And one of them was shot and killed. Those were American citizens who were legitimately protesting something of a conservative issue, and that made them the enemy of the state. But we have immigrants coming here. We have Muslims in this country who are launching protests all over the place about trying to push liberal sensibilities and things like that, and they get a pass. They get it. Not only do they get a pass, the governor of the state that authorized the execution of that man is now protecting those people. Think about that.
Well, we don't have to run, but we're backed up against the break. We always appreciate you being with us, and thank you so very much. We'll look forward to the next time.
Me too. Thank you very much. You have a good day.
Thank you. All righty.